All right, what's going on, kiddos? Haven't been posting a whole lot. Had some pretty major life events happen in the past year or so. This mattress in the background is unrelated. We just got a new mattress delivered. They wouldn't take the old one, so it's just chilling in here until we can figure out how to get rid of it. It's a whole process. I want to talk about expected goals against today. This is a metric that is consistently used way too often and taken too seriously. And I want to talk about what it is and why we shouldn't be using it nearly as much as we do. Now, this does have applications, okay? There's no question about that. At the same time, to determine who the best goaltender in the league is or what goaltender is playing the best, this is not a determining factor. This is expected goals against, right? And this goes with the expected goals category. Yeah, expected goals against percent, just expected goals, all that same type of formula, minor tweaks. You're subtracting actual goals scored from expected goals, and you're getting a new stat, things like that. So we're just talking about expected goals against, how it's calculated. This is from Money Puck. There are various models that calculate expected goals against, and they all do them a little differently and put out different values. Keep that in mind. Again, this is from Money Puck. They were great in having some transparency. Again, I do have questions, but at the same time, at least they have this, and there's transparency, and it's all on their website. Anyone can see it. You can't see the actual model they use. It's a program. I'm sure it's purchased or protected or whatever. It's not for the public use. It just isn't. That's how programs work, right? And you know, it also does things like the program does things like machine learning and calculating residual values and all that, all like, you know, kind of getting deep into the programming stuff. But I want to talk about the hockey part and what it includes and what it doesn't. Okay, factors. We're going to go down this list. This is, again, just listed off of Money Puck, and I got some extra details in here. The word speed is defined as the distance from the last event or divided by the time from the last event. Distance over time equals speed. Okay. Speed is a variable used in their program. That's how that's calculated. And from last event, what determines an event is kind of unclear. Only two examples were given, a face-off and a hit on Money Puck. So I don't necessarily know how those are factored in or what other events are considered throughout this process. I'm sure there are others. We don't know what they are at the moment. If you want to do some digging, that's great. I couldn't find anything. I didn't look super hard. That's all I could find. Distance from last event, over time from last event. First factor that they list, distance of shot from net. Okay, you're 20 feet out from the net, that's your distance. Great. Second one is time since last event. So you win a face-off, that's your last event, and then you take a shot. The time between that, there you go. Number 3 is shot type. They list backhand, they list wrist shot, I assume slap shot. Again, list is pretty limited. What types of shots they consider, kind of unknown. I would assume kind of the major shots, you know, snapshot, whatever. Next up, speed difference from last event. Okay, distance over time from the last event. So really just the speed in which the shot was taken from the previous event. That's it. Number 5 is shot angle. Now with shot angle, we're not talking about vertical angle, right? You take a shot, it goes up into the goaltender. We're talking about where on the ice. So if you're looking straight down at the ice, I don't know if I can like draw this real quick, right? I don't know if you can see that. Okay, it's kind of brief, right? You take a shot from center ice, that's 90 degrees. You take a shot from this red line, that's 0 degrees. So like that would be a 45-degree shot example. Okay, that's what they're talking about in terms of the angle. Again, very nice of them to provide that information. It's useful. No elevation difference in terms of shot. No elevation of the shot. Not necessarily shot location on goal is mentioned. So There's some questions there. And is that calculated with all the other factors? I don't know. Next up is, hold on, there's some of these overlap. Okay, so next up is east-west location of last shot, or east-west location of last event before shot. So this is east-west, this is north-south. So you're kind of just making a graph. How far is it over here? It puts a value. Okay, that's what we're talking about, east-west. Where was the last event located before the shot? Next up, they just say rebounds, and then there's a little blurb that describes how rebounds are calculated, and it's essentially the first shot taken on net, that angle, minus the rebounded shot angle, right? So you shoot on net, the rebound comes out, you take that second shot. So shot one, shot two. The angles of both shots divided by the time difference between those shots. And I assume that's from when the shot was taken, not from when the shot reached the net. Number 8 is last event before the shot. What happened before the shot? We have time since last event. We have what was the last event. Number 9, number of players on the ice for the defending team. If it's a 5-on-5, you have 5 players on the ice for the defending team. If it's a 4-on-5, you have 4 players on the ice for the defending team. The offensive team has a power play. This goes with number 11, man advantage, right? So if it's a 5-on-3, that's taken into consideration. I don't really know how shorthanded goals are scored with this, or 4-on-4, 3-on-3 play. It's a little too vague. It could be factored in here. It might not be, right? Number of players on ice only for the defending team. Explicitly states for the defending team. So if you're shorthanded, the other team has a power play, you go up and score a goal, great. Or if it's 4-on-4, for example, we know sometimes the percentage of goals for 4-on-4 play increases as opposed to 5-on-5 play. Is that considered? There's no man advantage per se. Usually penalties have to happen. Is that factored in? We don't really know. I would assume not, but I don't know. So maybe man advantage, but number of players on ice at even strength. I don't know. Number 10 is east-west location of the shot. Where was the shot taken, east or west? And that goes with 14, north-south location of the shot. Where's the shot being taken? That's 2 of these bullet points. Great. We did 11. We're going on to 12. Time since the power play began. Okay. I don't really know if they have a model as to at what point in power plays are goals typically scored and at what point in power plays are goals not necessarily scored. I don't know. It's a weird variable for me, but it is what it is. It's factored into there. Next up is distance from previous events. So we have time since last event, what was the last event, distance from last event. How far away was the last event before the shot was taken. And some of these seem to be integrated into others as well. Distance from previous event is also factored into speed difference from last event. So, it's kind of one big algorithm. They're trying to make it simpler. Okay. And the last one is empty net. I assume this is for a goaltender to not be knocked down in the stat a bit. If it's an empty net shot, that has nothing to do with the goaltender. They were on the ice. They may have saved it. They may have not. We don't know because the net was empty. Does this factor into if a goaltender is heading towards the net? Maybe they're almost at the bench, right? They're still on the ice, but they're about 5 feet away from the bench, ready to hop on. Does that count if the goal is scored? Is that an empty net shot? Yeah, I don't know. It depends what their specific model is. This isn't an NHL stat. This is an analytical stat that's provided by Money Puck and various other services. Breakaways were not mentioned in this list, but they did have a little blurb for it. Breakaways are measured in terms of the time difference between events. Okay? A shot, I guess, is an event as well. So time difference between events and the shot location on the ice. Among other listed factors are included in determining a breakaway, but realistically, I don't necessarily love the way this is calculated, and it gets really complicated and tough to determine what exactly is a breakaway and when. Hundreds of instances occur throughout the year where you could consider it a breakaway. You might not consider it a breakaway. It is what it is, right? There's variables there. But if you have, say, everybody else on the ice is over, scuffing it up, there's a little mosh pit happening at the other goal, and all you have is Connor McDavid coming down with all the time in the world to do spin-a-ramas, whatever. Again, not a penalty shot because this is regulation. This is just a breakaway, right? So you can do things like spin-a-ramas. You can do things like take a shot off the goaltender or get the rebound and score. You can do things like that. How is that necessarily factored in? That's a higher percentage shot than, say, like, I don't know, a fourth-line grinder guy, like I don't know, Matt Cook. It's like Matt Cook coming down on you one-on-one. He's probably just going to take a nice wrist shot before he gets to you. That type of thing. So how is that factored in? The quality of player, the percent of scoring on a breakaway or penalty shot isn't factored in for a player when it comes to breakaways. So that's kind of a question mark right there. Some of it works. Some of it, there's definitely faults in there. I'm not sure how the model actually works and lines up. It could work just fine with breakaways. I don't have an answer for you. We don't have that transparency, and that's understandable. We're not going to get that transparency, and we probably shouldn't expect that transparency because they'd have to release a lot of their data on their program, which is their program, right? So what are non-factors that, these are just off the top of my head, and I've already mentioned some: quality of offensive player, what defines a breakaway. A lot of these factors that they consider, they're really all offensive, except for the number of players on the ice for the defending team and a man advantage. The rest is really it's all offensive stats and variables. Non-factors, goalie screens. You have Zdeno Chara in front of you. You have Tage Thompson screening you. It's really hard to see around that guy. If your defense isn't clearing out those big bodies in front of you, so the goaltender can have a nice visual to the puck and see that shot come in, that their save percentage goes down significantly. We see a lot of teams do screens for this very reason. This is a big part of the game. There doesn't appear to be any mention or factor of goalie screens or visuals at all in expected goals against. We know some teams, when it comes to defending, don't remove screens. The Boston Bruins are a great example. In past years, they would get the opposing player who is screening their own goaltender, they would move him out of the way so the goaltender could see. The past few years under Jim Montgomery and Joe Sacco, that does not happen. And there's reasons for that, and it's not no shame or knock to either of those coaches, because again, there are reasons, and I'm not diving into all that now, but screens are not accounted for. Just throwing that out there. It's kind of a big factor. Another thing is, how are deflections accounted for? Are they considered a shot type? I don't know. It wasn't mentioned, right? And if a deflection is a shot type, does it count as a shot type if it goes off of a defending player, which we see happen, and those tend to be higher percentage chances that go in the net, right? Lowers the goaltender's save percentage in those scenarios. Also with deflections, the angle of the shot, the vertical angle, can change a lot, in addition to the horizontal angle changing, right? You can have a shot coming pretty up high at the goaltender, and then all of a sudden it just dips. That does not appear to be accounted for whatsoever. Change in shot angles during the shot is not mentioned. Just initial shot off the stick is mentioned. I want to throw that out there. That's a big factor. Deflections are a big part of the game. Just is what it is. A lot of goals are scored on deflections. A lot of games are won off of deflection goals. Next up is there's no measure for the number of rebounds. You only factor in 2 shots, right? The first shot, the second shot. And you can have a rebound shot and then a second rebound shot factored into this, it might not really be much of a difference than a first rebound versus a second rebound in terms of this overall equation. They have some graphs, and they say their rebound calculations work pretty well. But we also know that if a goaltender has to make 3 or 4 quality save attempts in a row because the other team continuously is getting shots off of rebounds, there's a good chance that puck is going to go into the net. A lot of game enders, 6-on-5s, you see everybody rush the net. Sometimes there's 3 or 4 rebound chances, and it's not super uncommon that one goes in the net, and then the game goes to overtime, right? That's not necessarily factored in here. What's next? There's no measure for odd man rushes. You get a 3-on-2. That's the same as having a 5-on-5. That's same as all 5 players, or all 10 players of 5 players from each team, everybody in the offensive zone. If it's just a 3-on-2 or a 2-on-1, I don't know. It doesn't seem to really be measured. In terms of odd man rushes, maybe it's measured as a man advantage, but it didn't really specify what classifies a man advantage. On the surface, you would just assume a power play. So I don't really have an answer for that. Odd man rushes seems to be a weird one. Again, we talked about it. The breakaway calculation is a little odd. I don't necessarily love it. It is what it is. I don't know how effective it is. Could be very effective. I don't have that answer for you. Next up, there's no measure for defensive systems or styles, right? Different coaches have different systems, have different styles, have different player and personnel preferences, and all those vary from team to team. You can have the same coach, Paul Maurice, go from Winnipeg to Florida, and it can be night and day in terms of how their systems are implemented because of the personnel on that team available and how adept they are to adjusting to that play style and that system. Again, Winnipeg wasn't bad by any means under Paul Maurice, but Florida is exceptional under Paul Maurice when running that system. And as loaded as Florida is, I promise you there are faults with that team that are so well covered up because of the coaching and because of the systems they play. It just is what it is. That's it. And I can dive into that in a separate video, but we're staying on topic here because I get off topic too often. So that's a factor. There's no measure for the quality of players on the ice. No measure for the quality of defense that your team can play in front of you. You have, Kalen Addison, or you have Evan Bouchard and Kalen Addison or Lowry or one of these players that isn't notorious for playing good defense, more offensive defensemen, right? Defensemen who aren't really good at defending. And then you add a forward group in, maybe also isn't good at defending. We've seen that. Some teams play awful team defense, and a part of that is because the forwards don't defend, or a part of that is because only the forwards defend and the defensive core is so weak. There's no factor for that whatsoever. If you're going against a team of you're going against a line of absolute defensive studs, right? You got Bergeron, you got whoever, Datsuk out there. You have a great defensive core. You have Slavin on the ice, for example. That's going to be very different goaltending in front of them than it will be for a bunch of slappies. A fourth liner of AHL guys and a defense pairing who is probably an AHL defense pairing. Right, your chances of it's going to impact your overall ability to make that save because those chances are going to be better, and that doesn't necessarily just factor into things like shot angle and location. Also, shot speed I didn't see mentioned in here at all. If you're taking a 90-mile-an-hour wrist shot from the face-off dot, that can be tough. If you're taking a 70-mile-an-hour shot from the slot versus a 10-mile-an-hour shot from the slot, and we've seen some lobs up. We see Bobrovsky take a lot of lob shots, just be patient and snag them out of the air. That seems to be essentially considered as a same shot. You're facing a 105-mile-an-hour shot from Shea Weber or 108 miles an hour from Weber or Chara versus, a Slavin slap shot, which may and this isn't indicative of Slavin, I'm just using his name as an example. You can use any defensive man here versus a slap shot of like 80 miles an hour, both taken from the blue line. That's not factored in here. There's a big speed differential when it comes at the goaltender. That difference of time to react is significantly decreased for the goaltender. That's not factored in here. So there's various things. That's it. Those are just things I'm thinking of and thought of off the top of my head. Didn't think too much into it. I have some stats. I have two players I want to talk about. One is UC Saros. One is Jeremy Swayman. And I want to talk about their goals, their expected goals against numbers for the past 3 seasons. Now, there's a variety of reasons. There's a variety of impacts. I forgot to write their stats on the board, but I got them written down right here. So, UC Saros this year, 58 games played, minus 7.4 goals against. I didn't pull up the numbers he had from last year. They weren't great. They weren't great numbers. The year before, this is the 2022-2023 season, 64 games played, 46.7 expected goals against. 46.7 versus minus 7.4 this year. Huge difference. What changed? You can blame the goaltender, whatever. You can blame conditioning. A lot of that comes down to personnel, and a big thing that happened between that 2022-2023 season to the last 2 years is the coaching. John Hines was the coach in 2022-2023. He was a very good defensive coach. I have my issues with John Hines, don't get me wrong. But when it comes to coaching defense, he does a very good job. It just is what it is. There's no getting around it. It's good. Andrew Brunette comes in, and we saw Andrew Brunette in Florida have more of an offensively oriented mindset. And again, that's fine, and that works for some teams, some systems, some organizations. There's factors. But as soon as Brunette became the coach, Saros went from 46.7 goals against to negatives in back-to-back straight years. I don't know if he was negative last year, but it was probably pretty close if he was not. That's, and that's kind of indicative as to what this tells you. You can use it, and if the number is good, then that's great. And if it's not good, well, there could be a variety of reasons. That's why I hate using this stat. Jeremy Swayman is a great example as well. Going back to the 2022-2023 season, he played 37 games. He had an expected goals against of 24 in 37 games. Okay? And expected goals against is not factored in per game. It's for the entirety of games played. So for 37 games, 24 expected goals against. It's a pretty similar ratio to what UC Saros had in the same season, where he had 46.7. Insane number. Last year, Swayman had an expected goals against of 18.4. 44 games played. Both of those seasons were under Jim Montgomery. This season, and there are other factors, don't get me wrong, he's definitely let in some soft goals, but at the same time, he wasn't nearly as bad as the numbers would tell you. He made a lot of great clutch saves that really nobody gave him credit for, including, and God love him, the Bruins announcer, commentator, color commentator, and play-by-play analyst. And they're great, and they do a good job. But a lot of these great saves were not necessarily highlighted. So a lot of people, if you're not watching closely, may have missed just how good that save was. This year, Swayman played 58 games. He was a minus 9.1 goals against, which is among the league's worst. It just is what it is, right? So, moral of the story is this has applications. It's very good for determining the difference between goaltenders on the same team. You can even make the stretch for comparing goaltenders on different teams in nearly similar systems, coaching styles, and player personnel. How well does the forward group defend? How well do the defensive core? How well does the defensive core defend? Right? There's a variety of factors, and this only captures just a few of them. There's a lot more that goes into determining what determines if a goaltender is playing well and what isn't. And I don't think this stat does that. I don't. There's a variety. It's tough. It's tough because goaltenders measuring how good they are is it's difficult. There's not many stats that do it. This is one of the more intensive models to determine how well a goaltender is playing. At the same time, it's not necessarily a great stat to use to determine if a goaltender is playing well. So I have a lot of issues with expected goals against. Again, there are applications and there are a lot of things it does right. There's a lot of things it does not account for, though, that are really important, really important. And for that reason, you can factor it in because, again, the overall stat categories to really evaluate a goaltender, they're tough. They're tough. There's not great stat lines out there, right? So obviously, like, this gets used and fine, but it should not be the overriding factor. Well, this goaltender had 46.7 goals against. He's clearly the best goaltender in the league. That is indicative of a lot of factors, right? You can have UC Saros on a great team. You can have UC Saros on a bad team. Those goals against numbers are going to look very different. You can change around your defensive core. Those defensive numbers or those expected goals against numbers are going to look very different. You change your coach, typically the systems change, whether it's immediate or over time. Those expected goals against numbers are going to look very, very different. Just is what it is. So that's it. That's why I don't like using expected goals against. There's a lot that goes into it. I think it's good. Again, I will reiterate, it's good for some applications. And with the limited stats available to analyze a goaltender, this is one of the better ones, but it's not great. And it shouldn't be taken over any other stat. It should be factored in just like any other stat is. Factored in just like plus minuses, right? Great for team comparisons and so on, sort of. Overall league comparisons, take it with a grain of salt type thing. So that's my summary. Expected goals against. Let me know if you have questions, comments, whatever you want me to look into it more. Sure. You want me to talk about other things related to this, like why certain goaltenders on good teams have bad expected goals against, whereas goaltenders on bad teams have high expected goals against. Off the top of my head, Stuart Skinner and Lucas Dostal. Just throwing those out there because there are reasons for that, and I'd be happy to talk about them. But that's it for this video because this is already taking too long. I'm not going to go on a whole nother rant about players. If you want that, I'm throwing my pen. If you want that, let me know. I'll talk about it in a separate video. But that's it for now. I appreciate you and take care, all right?